Worry has a strange way of disguising itself as responsibility. It makes you feel like you're doing something useful, like you're staying one step ahead of disaster, like the sleepless replaying of every possible bad outcome is somehow a form of preparation. But underneath that disguise, worry isn't protecting you from anything. It's just fear, rehearsing a future that hasn't happened yet, and in most cases, never will. Think about how much of your mental energy over the last month went toward things that never actually occurred. The conversation you dreaded that turned out fine. The diagnosis you feared before the test came back normal. The rejection you braced for that never arrived because the offer came through instead. If you added up every hour spent bracing for disasters that didn't happen, you'd probably be stunned at how much of your life has been spent defending against a future that was never real in the first place. That's the strange arithmetic of worry. It charges you in the present for debts you may never actually owe. Here's what almost nobody tells you about this. Worrying doesn't make you more prepared. It makes you more exhausted. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between an actual threat and an imagined one. When you lie awake running worst-case scenarios, your body responds as if the danger is already happening, flooding you with the same stress chemistry you'd need if you were actually being chased by something. Except nothing is chasing you. You are simply sitting in a bed, in the dark, voluntarily activating a survival system for a war that exists only in your head. And the cost of that isn't abstract. It's the fatigue you carry into tomorrow, the shortened patience with people you love, the body that never quite gets to rest because some part of it is always on alert. Carl Jung, a psychologist who spent decades studying the parts of the mind that operate beneath our conscious awareness, believed that most chronic worry isn't really about the future at all. It's the unconscious trying to manage something it was never given permission to look at directly. What you refuse to examine consciously, he taught, doesn't disappear. It comes back to you in another form, and worry is one of its favorite disguises, because worry feels productive in a way that raw fear does not. Nobody wants to admit they're simply afraid. But everybody can justify being a worrier, because worrying, on the surface, looks like care. Here's the truth underneath the disguise. Worry is a story your mind tells you about how things have to go wrong. If I don't check this one more time, something bad will happen. If I don't anticipate every possible outcome, I'll be caught off guard. If I stop thinking about this, I'm being careless. None of that is protection. That's a nervous system that has confused vigilance with safety, running a script it was never given the chance to question. And the moment you catch that script running, even for a few seconds, something interesting happens. You realize the world isn't actually collapsing in that moment. It's just you, alone with your own mind, manufacturing a crisis that hasn't arrived and may never arrive at all. Consider how this plays out physically, because the body always tells the truth even when the mind is lying to itself. Notice what happens in your chest the next time you catch yourself spiraling into a worry loop. The tightness, the shallow breath, the jaw that's been clenched for the last 20 minutes without your permission. That is not thinking. That is your body bracing for impact against something that, in most cases, is still just a thought. The tragedy of chronic worry is that it makes you suffer the impact of disasters that never land, over and over, sometimes for years, while the actual events of your life, when they finally arrive, are almost always more survivable than the version you rehearsed in your head at 3 a.m. Stop worrying the way fear taught you to worry, and something shifts. You start attending to your life the way presence teaches you to attend to it instead. You still plan, you still prepare, you still take reasonable precautions, but you stop needing to have every outcome mapped out in advance in order to feel safe enough to breathe. That distinction, small as it sounds, changes the entire texture of a day, because your days were never actually being ruined by the events themselves. They were being ruined by the hours spent bracing for events that mostly never came. Jung spoke about the unconscious material we refuse to face as something that doesn't stay contained. What isn't looked at directly, he taught, doesn't dissolve on its own. It leaks sideways into the rest of your life, disguised as something more acceptable. Anxiety about a work deadline becomes snapping at your partner over something unrelated. Fear about your finances becomes an inability to enjoy a meal you can actually afford. Worry rarely stays where it started. It borrows a costume and shows up somewhere else, and most people spend years fighting the costume without ever recognizing the fear underneath it. Now take this into your relationships, because worry rarely shows up more destructively than it does here. Think about the difference between someone who checks in with a partner because they genuinely want to connect, and someone who checks in because they need reassurance that nothing has gone wrong. The first version deepens a relationship. The second version, however loving it feels from the inside, slowly exhausts the person on the receiving end, because every message carries an invisible question underneath it. Are we okay? Are you still here? Did I do something wrong? Worry turns ordinary silence into a threat. A delayed reply becomes evidence of abandonment. A quieter mood becomes proof that something is falling apart. None of this is actually about the other person. It's a nervous system that never learned how to sit with uncertainty without narrating a disaster to fill the gap. The people who feel most secure to be around are rarely the ones who worry the least about the relationship in some careless, indifferent sense. They're the ones who have learned to tolerate not knowing everything all the time, who can let a pause exist without needing to solve it immediately, who trust that a relationship can survive an unanswered question for a few hours without collapsing. That tolerance for uncertainty isn't coldness. It's actually one of the warmest things you can offer someone, because it means your presence with them doesn't come wrapped in a demand for constant proof that everything is fine. Take it into your health, because this is another place worry masquerades as diligence. There's a real difference between paying attention to your body and interrogating it. The person who notices a new symptom and takes a reasonable, measured step, calling a doctor, scheduling a check, is acting with care. The person who spirals into hours of searching every possible explanation, cataloging worst-case diagnoses before a single test has even been run, is not being careful. They're borrowing suffering from a future that hasn't happened, and paying for it twice. Once in the anxious hours of research, and again if the actual news ever arrives. Worry convinces you that thinking about the worst case is a form of readiness. It rarely is. Readiness is calm enough to take the next right step. Worry is often just the noise, standing in the way of hearing what that next step actually is. Take it into money, because financial worry might be the most normalized form of chronic anxiety there is, treated almost as a virtue in a culture that equates stress with responsibility. The person constantly checking their balance, tightening with every unexpected expense, calculating worst-case budgets in their head during moments meant for rest, is not necessarily more responsible than the person who has made a plan and then allows themselves to stop thinking about it between check-ins. In fact, the evidence tends to run the other way. Chronic financial anxiety narrows your thinking, makes you more likely to make short-term, fear-driven decisions rather than sound long-term ones, and burns through the very clarity you'd need to actually improve your situation. Worry about money rarely produces more money. It mostly produces more worry, dressed convincingly as prudence. Jung believed that whatever remains unexamined in us tends to return disguised as what he called fate, meaning the same pattern keeps reappearing in your life as though it were simply bad luck, when really it's an old, unprocessed fear finding new material to attach itself to. The person who has never looked honestly at where their financial anxiety actually comes from will likely find that anxiety following them, regardless of how much money they eventually accumulate, because the fear was never really about the number in the account. It was about an old belief that safety has to be earned through constant vigilance, and no amount of money can fully answer a fear that was never really about money in the first place. Now take this into your work, because worry here often gets mistaken for excellence. The person who cannot stop refreshing their inbox at midnight, who cannot enjoy a completed project because they're already anxious about the next one, who treats every piece of feedback as a verdict on their entire worth rather than information about a single piece of work, is not more dedicated than everyone else. They are simply more afraid, and that fear is doing an enormous amount of exhausting labor that a calmer form of diligence could accomplish with far less cost. The strange thing about chronic worry at work is that it often makes people less effective, not more, because a mind occupied with rehearsing catastrophe has less room left over for the actual thinking the work requires. Presence produces better decisions than panic ever has, and yet panic is the one most people have been taught to mistake for commitment. Consider too how worry shows up in parenting, because few places make the cost of chronic anxiety more visible, even though it usually comes from the deepest kind of love. The parent who worries constantly, who cannot let a child out of sight without cataloging every possible danger, who treats ordinary childhood risk as an emergency waiting to happen, is not protecting their child more effectively than a calmer parent would. Children absorb anxiety the way they absorb everything else in a home, quietly, without being told, simply by watching how the adults around them hold uncertainty. A child raised by someone who worries constantly often learns, without either of them ever saying it out loud, that the world is fundamentally unsafe and that vigilance is the price of survival. A child raised by someone who has learned to hold uncertainty with more ease tends to learn something different, that the world has risk in it, yes, but that risk doesn't have to be met with dread in order to be handled wisely. There's a particular kind of worry that deserves its own attention, the kind that shows up as decision paralysis. This is the worry that convinces you that you cannot move forward until every variable has been accounted for, until every possible outcome has been mapped and defended against in advance. It feels like thoroughness. It is usually just fear wearing the mask of diligence. The truth, almost nobody wants to hear, is that most decisions cannot actually be made safe through more thinking. At a certain point, additional worry doesn't produce additional clarity. It produces additional noise, and the person trapped in it mistakes the noise for progress, circling the same handful of fears for weeks, while the actual opportunity, whatever it was, quietly moves on without them. Jung had a name for the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at honestly. He called it the shadow, and he warned that whatever isn't faced consciously gets projected outward instead, onto circumstances, onto other people, onto an imagined future that becomes a screen for fears that were never really about the future at all. This matters here because so much of chronic worry is shadow material wearing the costume of practical concern. The fear of not being good enough gets projected onto a work deadline. The fear of being unlovable gets projected onto a partner's silence. The fear of being fundamentally unsafe gets projected onto a bank account, a diagnosis, a decision that has to be perfect before it can be made. You think you're worried about the circumstance in front of you. Often, you're actually still carrying an old, unspoken fear that found the nearest available surface to attach itself to. This is worth sitting with honestly, because most people spend years trying to manage the external symptom without ever turning to look at the internal cause. They change jobs to escape the anxiety and discover, a few months in, that the same restless dread followed them into the new one. They leave one relationship, hoping the worry will stay behind, only to find the identical pattern rebuilding itself with someone new. The common thread running through every one of these repeating patterns is rarely the actual circumstance. It's the unexamined fear traveling quietly from room to room, wearing a different costume in each one, waiting to be recognized rather than managed around. So what does it actually look like to stop worrying without becoming careless? Because that's the fear hiding underneath this entire conversation, that letting go of the vigilance means letting go of responsibility, becoming someone who doesn't plan, doesn't prepare, doesn't take life seriously. That isn't what this is. Stopping the worry doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop needing to control every variable in advance in order to feel steady enough to function. You still make the plan, you still take the reasonable precaution, you still show up prepared. What changes is what happens in the hours after, the hours you used to spend rehearsing disaster instead of simply living the life that was actually in front of you. There's a quiet discipline in learning to let a thought pass without following it all the way down. The next time a worry rises, instead of grabbing it and building an entire catastrophe out of it, try simply noticing it. There's the thought again. It doesn't need my full attention right now. This isn't suppression, and it isn't denial. It's the difference between a thought passing through you and a thought taking up permanent residence, running the show from a room you never agreed to hand it. The first few times you try this, it will feel unnatural, almost irresponsible, as though you're neglecting something important by not chasing the worry all the way to its worst conclusion. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're finally interrupting a pattern that's been running unquestioned for a very long time. Watch what starts to change as you practice this, even in small doses. You send the message, and you don't check for a reply every few minutes. You have the hard conversation, and you don't spend the rest of the night replaying every word. You make the decision with the information you actually have, instead of waiting for a certainty that was never going to arrive. Each of these moments is small, almost imperceptible on its own, but they accumulate, the same way any repeated practice accumulates, until one day you notice that an entire week has gone by without the old spiral showing up at all, and you can't quite remember when it started to loosen its grip. And here's the part that tends to surprise people the most. Once you stop worrying in the anxious, bracing sense, you don't become someone who's careless about their life. You become someone who finally has room to actually live it. You stop spending your mornings rehearsing conversations that haven't happened. You stop spending your evenings replaying decisions that are already made. You stop treating every silence, every delay, every uncertain moment as evidence that something has gone wrong. And in that space, something steadier begins to grow, not the absence of care, but a different relationship to it. One that doesn't require constant vigilance in order to feel like it counts. Jung believed that much of our suffering doesn't come from what actually happens to us, but from our resistance to what already is. The unlived life, he called it, the parts of ourselves and our circumstances we refuse to accept as they actually stand, don't go away simply because we spend our energy fighting them in our heads. Individuation, in his language, the lifelong process of becoming fully yourself, rather than a collection of inherited fears, begins the moment you stop trying to control every outcome in advance and start meeting your actual life as it arrives, one moment at a time, with whatever it happens to bring. This is worth remembering the next time the old pattern returns, because it will, at least for a while. Worry that's been running for years doesn't dissolve because you understood it once in a video or a conversation. It loosens slowly, the way any long-held tension loosens, with practice, with repetition, with the simple, unglamorous act of noticing it and choosing not to follow it all the way down, again and again, until the choosing stops requiring so much effort. There will be nights the old spiral comes back in full force. That isn't failure. That's simply an old pattern being older than the awareness you're bringing to it now. And every time you meet it with a little more steadiness than the last time, it gets a little quieter, a little less automatic, until eventually you notice it's been gone for longer than you expected without your having to fight for it. That's the whole quiet secret underneath all of this. You were never actually keeping yourself safe by worrying so much. You were only ever exhausting yourself in advance for events that mostly never arrived, and even the ones that did arrive rarely needed the years of rehearsal you gave them. Worry less about what might happen, and you free up everything you need to finally meet what's actually happening. Not the disaster you built at 3 a.m, not the catastrophe you rehearsed until it felt certain, but the ordinary, survivable, often quietly good life that was waiting for your attention the entire time, right here. The moment you finally stopped bracing long enough to notice, it had already arrived.